He verbally remove the fucking king from his throne. Most assuredly, yeah, I'm ruling all on my own, but it ain't hurting me. You could never come from my home, cause you don't worry me.
Ladies and
Talk shit
gentlemen,
is
you
one
know
to the
who it
dome,
is.
and that's a certainty.
It is I, Mr. Chaos, the host, the creator, the curator, and the founder of the Evolution of Chaos. Today, I have a really, really special guest with me. If you guys know, I am a huge old school wrestling fan. And when I say old school, I'm talking Magnum TA, I'm talking Dusty Rhodes, I'm talking Tully Blanchard, I'm talking Nick Bockwinkel, classic wrestling. This gentleman was trained by a guy who comes just before that era. He was trained by one of the greatest wrestlers of all time in Killer Kowalski. If you don't know that name, Killer Kowalski also trained Triple H. He's trained Frankie Kazarian and countless other wrestlers that you either love, hate, or want to see them get their asses kicked. So today, before I bring him on, let me tell you something too. This guy has trained. If you ever watched Black and Gold NXT, this guy has trained some of your favorite superstars on on the Triple H era NXT. So let me bring on my guest today. Coach of legends, coached by legends, Coach Mike Hollow. Thanks for coming on, Coach.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. So yeah, let's you and I were talking, before we went on. We're both huge lifelong wrestling fans. So what did it mean to you as a fan to get trained by somebody as legendary as Killer Kowalski?
Well, I'll always tell the story that first time that I had an opportunity to walk the stairs of 170 Pleasant Street in Malden, Mass, and hearing the body slams going on up at the second floor. Uh, if I'd be lying to you if I told you I wasn't intimidated, scared, and nervous. And finally, when you walk through the door and I had have the opportunity to meet Walter. Here's this ominous figure, 6'7", 285 pounds of a man, larger than life. And so it's awestruck, intimidating, and impressive. But, it was a great, a hell of an experience.
That guy, he is. When you talk about Killer Kowalski, you're talking about a name that even new wrestlers, even these young wrestlers, when you say Killer Kowalski, there's instantly a level of respect that just that name commands.
Right.
Um, him as a person, outside of the wrestling business, was it different, or was he like a lot of the old school guys where you get what you get inside the ring, outside the ring, it's the same person?
No, I mean, for Walter, he was completely different. With what you saw on TV as a villain and as a heel, from a persona standpoint, and with what he was putting across in front of, in arenas across America or throughout the world. If you had an opportunity to get to know him, spend time with him, he was completely opposite of with what he was on TV. Just the purest form of a gentleman, well educated, well spoken, just a very generous and kind man.
Triple H tells a story about how he got his name from Walter, about the infamous pizza box and making up his name essentially on the spot. And he seems, obviously I never got to meet him, but he just seems like one of those guys where if you're learning from him, you're like, I'm getting a college education essentially for free from this man.
Yeah.
How much did his influence and his teaching kind of guide you going forward throughout the rest of your career, from being a wrestler to even being a coach?
I think the one thing that resonated with me, from Walter, that he instilled upon all of us, whether it was me or other students, um, is make the people notice you. With what you do within the confines of the ring, is that you want people to resonate and pay attention, and to just the things that you can bring to the table as an entertainer, as a performer, as a wrestler. Walter wanted you to be larger than life.
Yeah, I'm so in awe of people who have stories about people from from Killer Kowalski's generation. I got to talk to a guy who was trained by Vern Gagne. You talk about legendary wrestling training right there. I'm in awe of those stories as a fan because it's amazing how in depth and how intelligent and how just naturally perceptive to everything these guys of that old school generation were.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's still there today, or do you think we've kind of, or the newer generation of wrestlers has kind of got away from that?
Definitely have gotten away from that from, as the business has evolved and changed, the speed of the business has changed. The work has changed with where, from Walter's, standpoint and era, it was much more methodic, slow with where they really wanted you to, see with what they were doing, hold your emotion, garner your emotion. And today is more of, as it's spot driven, that's creating emotion, which becomes a real challenge for people to become emotionally vested, because, it's still good versus evil, and you have to be able to decipher between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when it comes down to it, as a fan, there's only a handful of storylines that really resonate. They're all told different ways throughout the years, but like you said, it basically comes down to good versus evil, and knowing how to manipulate that and not make it taste the same every single time.
Right.
And I think guys of that generation, guys of your generation, are much, much better at that than some of the performers are today. But there are guys, and I'll say a couple names, and you'll instantly, hopefully it'll bring a smile back. Guys like Tommaso Ciampa, guys like Kofi Kingston, guys, let's see, who else have you trained? Let's see. I've got some of the list here. Kofi Kingston, Tommaso Ciampa, Darren Young, Fred Rosser, Ivar. Like, that's just some of the guys who are uber successful in the business. Formerly Oni Lorcan. Just these guys that are, you can tell the guys who've been trained old school versus the guys who've just been trained to do moves.
Well, I think, to your point is, the guys that you had just mentioned, one of the things that resonates with them that they try to put across is they want their audiences to be emotionally vested with them. Mm-hmm. Right. So, and that carries over the ring ropes in terms from an emotional standpoint. And that just really, helps garner emotion, tells the story. And finally, when it's time to go home and the referee counts 3, it's not how much they did, it's with what they did, when they did it, how they did it, where they put it, what they got out of it, and and what it meant. So I think that's a big difference today from those guys to for some of the other guys that you might be seeing on TV today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially if you look at, just take Kofi for an example. Kofi Mania, when that hit, I mean, it was everywhere.
Yeah,
it was the biggest thing, not just in pro wrestling, but it was the biggest thing in sports for that whole time. It was on ESPN and Fox Sports and USA Today. Like, Kofi does such a great job of just being Kofi, but being Kofi enough that where people are like, oh, I could be him. I can see myself in him. And that's why I think Kofi, guys like Tommaso too, but Kofi specifically, when fans watch him, you're like, I don't care what he does, I'm always going to love Kofi because of who Kofi is. And that's a real old school mentality.
Yeah, it's that self-resonating, that it factor that just carries over with where people just really from everyday, people in society just can really connect with them.
Yeah. There's 2 other names that I wanted to bring up doing my research on you. Dr. Tom Pritchard, who, if you guys don't know who Tom Pritchard is, as soon as this is over, just look at anything in WWE. Tom Pritchard probably had a hand to do with it. The other guy is the first Intercontinental Champion ever, Pat Patterson. Those are 2 big names that come up every time I look you up. So having Killer Kowalski and Tom Pritchard and Pat Patterson, how did those 3 kind of shape you into being what you eventually became?
I think one of the things that, that was really great when we had CTC, Dr. Tom was a frequent guest in coming up, to training sessions and seminars. And watching the students, just, being able to take away with what he was trying to build and with what he was looking for from the development of students, the foundation piece, the fundamentals, the little things, being in the weeds. So really when talent was being evaluated, you could tell that, there was a good, strong base, foundation with their work, both in and out of the ring. They knew how to carry themselves. So he was, pivotal during the CTC times and definitely, helpful to me in terms of, helping me find my way from a teaching standpoint to really, look after the basics and the foundations of, when it comes to training guys and girls. And with Pat, you can't say enough about him, just a genius, great finish guy, just how he looked at the business, where he put things, just his creativity, his knowledge. I was fortunate to be friends with him for over 20 years, and being able to, just ask questions, be a sponge, and just really, being fortunate to, have the great insight from him and Dr. Tom and Walter. I couldn't have asked for anything better in terms of with what I'm allowed to do today from a privilege standpoint of, teaching the guys and girls that, want to come to the school and spend time with us, to really want it to, do it the right way.
Absolutely. And you, as a guy who I love that old school era. Like I'm a huge Nick Bockwinkel fan because of how psychologically terrifying he was when he spoke. Like when Nick Bockwinkel said anything on the mic, you stopped and you took notice. When you can see even me as a guy who's kind of tangentially getting into the wrestling business, you can tell looking back in the days what was a Pat Patterson finish and what wasn't.
Right.
Because Pat had this way of making things slick. Like you would look and be like, I didn't even think that would work, but it does.
Yeah.
And, I always look at when I call somebody a legend, I call them a legend because other people are calling them a legend. If you look about the way people talk about Dr. Tom and Pat, and like I mentioned before, Killer Kowalski, everybody has nothing but adoration and love for those guys. And there's a reason for that.
Absolutely. I mean, you think about with what those guys have allowed others to do in regards to paving the way from, their insight, their knowledge. One of the things that, they always share with me, all three of them, is, make sure you give back. There's so much misinformation today in the world of professional wrestling. And, you can get lost in all that noise. So if a guy like me in the school that, I'm going to be teaching at soon, is we can, send guys and girls on the right path in the right direction, both in and out of the ring, that's a success. And we're doing with what was asked of us from others.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got two questions. The first one is from JP from the Irish Whip podcast, who you know. He said, what does having a complete training facility, which you're about to get into this I saw the pictures on Facebook, this insane facility. What is having that complete facility do to elevate your already legendary training status?
I just think, with what it's really going to allow us to do from a training standpoint, from a media room, from nutrition to weight training, from in-ring work, we'll really be able to go 360 from a training and development standpoint. Professionalism, like I said, you'll hear me say a lot, both in and out of the ring. I think those pieces are so important because it is a business. And sometimes that gets lost. I come across a lot of guys and girls that just sometimes are missing that piece. And as you know, it's, first impressions are lasting impressions. So if with whatever we can do to, keep everybody on the straight and narrow, so when that opportunity comes, more often than not, they're prepared for getting that opportunity and they can get through the door.
Yeah, absolutely. From the, like I said, the info that I did my research and I the pictures that I saw, you guys are essentially building a performance center.
Exactly.
And it's the state of independent wrestling right now is insane. Insane because the like when I first started watching wrestling, independence was a dirty word. Wrestling fans were WWF or WCW. That was who I knew and who I grew up around. But now, just in San Antonio alone, there's Mission Pro, there's Dog Pound Championship Wrestling, there's River City Wrestling, there's Hybrid Wrestling. Like there's 4 or 5 different independent promotions just in San Antonio. It's grown so much. And then with you add facilities like what you're talking about, these kids are going to come out and they may not, you're never going to be 100% polished. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
They're going to have advantages that guys 5 years ago breaking into the indies didn't have.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a 6,000 square foot facility. It's going to have multiple rings, state of the art training, solid trainers. So to your point, there's really an advantage that we're trying to create, and we should, right? We should create that advantage to, put them out in front with where, there's opportunities, and that's why they're doing with what they're doing is to grow and learn their craft.
Yeah, absolutely. Another friend of my show, Josh, he wants to know what are the top 3 qualities somebody with your experience looks for in a person looking to get started in professional wrestling?
I'd have to say, there's so many people that I've come across from a teaching standpoint. And one of the things that always sticks out with me that I think is so important at this level and as you're evolving, you got to be coachable. I mean, at this level, you've got to be able to, take constructive criticism, make it work for you. Because all the top guys that you see on TV today, from Rock, Austin, the Triple H, I can go down the line, they're all being coached, whether they were the main event or the first match. Someone was helping them, giving them insight and direction and guidance. And if you're not open to that, it becomes, vastly difficult for you to be able to turn the page and get to with where you need to be, because it's a long haul. It's a long haul to get to with where you need to be, and you need all the help you can get.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think just from an outsider looking in, I think one of the problems is everybody wants instant gratification now.
Yes.
Whereas guys like a CM Punk spent years on the independent scene before he ever got a major deal. Guys like Eddie Kingston, the guys who are major players today, spent a lot of time, the hot dog and a handshake. You hear it all the time in interviews, but a lot of these guys were grinding and grinding and grinding for years and years and years. And now it's like, oh, I finished wrestling school. Now let me go be the WWE champion. That's not how it works.
Not even close.
I always find it so funny. I've been very, very blessed to have started a relationship with some of the local promotions here and have some of the local independent guys on my show. What I am finding now is guys are a lot more punctual, and they're a lot more, I don't want to say they have better manners, but they're a lot more well-behaved than when I was watching independent wrestling when I was a kid, because now Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, people are watching all the time. How do you think from a coach's perspective, how do you think that adding the social media has affected what up and coming wrestlers are able to do and able to get away with?
I think the social media platform can be a blessing if done or utilized correctly. I think it can be a great vehicle. And I also think it can be detrimental with where, you put yourself in a position with where either you're saying or photos, with where, as any major company is going to do their legwork and basically do their research on you before they let you into their house. So leverage it to the best of your ability with where the stuff that you're putting out there is clean and tells a good story about you or her, and make that work. Keep your personal feelings or political beliefs out of the equation altogether, and just keep it pure business.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I don't think there's anything, if you see something wrong and you speak up about it, I think that's a completely separate issue.
Yeah.
But the second you start denigrating people or start treating people like garbage because they disagree with you, you're essentially saying, I don't want to be a professional wrestler ever again.
Right.
You've
got to be respectful, right? And you've got to be mindful of people. A quick Dr. Tom story. One of the things he always used to say to our students is that, we'd send guys and girls to TV, they might have 3 or 4 minutes in the ring, but they'd be out back for 8 hours. And there's all sets of eyes that are always paying attention to who's doing what, how they behaving, how they interacting, how are they carrying themselves. So you just never know, who's watching.
Yeah, and you never know who has what position in what company either.
Yes.
And that's the other thing that I'm learning from kind of building these relationships. Like I was at a Mission Pro show, which is run by Thunder Rosa. I was at a Mission Pro show and literally walked in, sat down 2 seats away from me was Mark Henry scouting for WWE before he went to AEW, and none of the wrestlers knew he was going to be there. He just showed up, and as a fan, I literally didn't watch anything in the ring because I wanted to see what Mark was watching for. I wanted to see if he's like, okay, this is what I'm noticing, or if he's just going to sit back. And honestly, to me, it was more interesting watching him than it was watching the wrestling match. And it's not a knock on the wrestlers. That's me being kind of an obsessive kind of dork about the behind the scenes stuff in wrestling.
Right. And he was probably looking for the little things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Exactly.
He man, it's such a blessing now. It's so different from when it was, in the 80s and the 90s. You have different people and gay and bisexual and transgenders and intergender matches and stuff like that. It's so different. And what's cool about it now is you're not beholden to any one thing. Like I'm not a deathmatch wrestler guy. This is not my thing. But it's out here making millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Millions of dollars. And that's what's so cool. And the other part that's so cool now is, and I kind of want to get your take on this, the emergence of women's wrestling as just being wrestling now, and these women that are main eventing WrestleMania and SmackDowns and Raws and Impacts. How does that, as a trainer and as a coach and as somebody who's been through the business, with the emergence of women's wrestling, how does that make you feel?
I think it's fantastic. I think, when Fit Finley did with what he did back in his time with the girls, during the Attitude Era, from Trish to Leader, that whole group, and being able to, turn the key and completely go in a different direction and train them, start to work in like the men, those in the talent, bringing the things that they do to, to the in-ring performance, spoke volumes. And I think it's been a blessing. And I think it's one of the things that helps keep the business interesting, with where it's just a different take for the demographic of people to want to continue to watch wrestling.
Yeah, absolutely. We got another question. If my mouse decides it wants to work, there we go. So this is my friend Paul. He was we were stationed in the Army at Fort Hood together.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to know, in your opinion, the best wrestler you have trained, regardless of their current status.
Best wrestler.
I know that's kind of hard. It's like picking your favorite kid.
Yeah, kind of like my kids, and they're all different and they're all special, and there was something about each and every one of them. Even the ones that were successful on the independents, and even to the ones that are doing with what they do today regularly on TV. I'll use Kofi Tommaso and Ivar for an example. All three of them just had great determination, grit and grind. Tommaso and Ivar just were, their fortitude never to give up, their story from how many times where someone had said no, and to Kofi to be able to have the longevity that he has is tremendous. So, those three guys, stick out to me, but there's a lot of other successful ones on the independents that were successful outside the business, but the business helped them become successful outside the business. Mm-hmm. And that's the beauty of professional wrestling as well, but because there's so many life takeaways that you can take from this business to allow you to prosper and grow outside to be in a better position in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at, I'm such a fan of Tommaso. And I was of him in Pro Wrestling Guerrilla and way before he ever got to WWE. Tommaso has done a fantastic job of being Tommaso, but tweaking it every place he goes to where it's fresh every single, like when he came to WWE, when he came to NXT, it was like, oh shit, Tommaso Ciampa's gonna get a chance at the big time. And then they did a slow build up and he brought the Psycho Killer back and the DIYs. Like, it's so, guys like that, I sit back as a fan and I'm like, this is why I fell in love with professional wrestling.
I'll give you one more on Tommaso. So back in early 2000s when he and I first met, he was hurt at the time during his first year, and he really couldn't do much training. But he came to class 4 days a week, and he had a notebook, and he had a notebook, and he had a notebook, and he wrote and wrote and wrote. And finally, after that year, where things got cleared up and he could go, he got after it. But just imagine, just coming to class and just watching and taking notes. That alone says something right there.
Yeah, that's a whole different mindset of, fuck it. When I'm ready to get back in the ring, I'm going to get back in the ring.
Yeah.
He is an example of overcoming his neck injuries and all the stuff that he's had to overcome. Like, it's so cool to see him just at the top of his game. But I don't think he's nearly hit the peak yet.
No.
Not even remotely close.
Nope.
The other thing I wanted to ask is, do you think wrestlers should go through the independents and kind of grind that way before they get into bigger promotions? Or do you think, not that there's a bad way either way, but do you think going straight for the bigger promotions is advantageous?
Well, I think, if you're going to cut your teeth on the independents, it creates a different type of mindset with where, WWE, for example, is recruiting outside of that mindset, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of passion on the independents with where guys like CM Punk, Tommaso, Ivar had spent so many years trying to find their way and finally getting that opportunity. And one of the things that independent has done, it's forced WWE's hand, and this is with where the training piece comes in for guys and girls to really go out and find their way and get that good solid foundation. Because if that was more so the case, WWE wouldn't have taken the path that they have in terms of trying to find talent outside of out of the independents. So our goal with the new school is to restructure that with where we go down that path and we create the right ways and eliminate the wrong ways, and hopefully some of our students at the facility will get noticed and get opportunities. I don't think there's a right way or there's a wrong way, but there's just two different mindsets from a passion standpoint.
Yeah, I know. I completely agree. It's so different for me because as a fan, like I there's certain people, like there's a guy out of Michigan named Isaiah Broner, and this dude is a monster. I kind of jokingly gave him the nickname of the modern day Mike Tyson. Because when dude hits somebody, it looks like he snatched their soul. He is on the independents grinding in Detroit, here in Texas, California, the East Coast. That's a guy where if he wasn't on the independent scene, I don't know that he would have the ability to really have the time to craft where he needs to be as a bigger dude.
Right.
But then there's guys like, there's a guy named the Savage Gentleman, Victor Benjamin. I'm a huge fan of him. His wife is Lady Frost. He's on the independents, but honestly, to me, he's a guy just body-wise. Go, boy. He's a guy body-wise and work-wise that literally, if you put him in Impact or you put him in AEW or the new ROH or New Japan, he's instantly going to become your top tier guy. That's how good and polished he is. So to your point, I don't think there's one way to be successful and one way not to be successful.
Right. And it's one of those things that you just never know with what they're looking for. And they come across that, male or female, and they fit the bill and off we go.
Yeah, absolutely. JP wants to know, how do you feel about WWE going after athletes rather than indies? And could someone like Josh Briggs excel if he talked more about his football past?
Good question. I think WWE, from a creative standpoint, has to find talent, right? And, they're going to look where, again, from a business standpoint, it's expensive to train people. and and it's tough to clean up bad habits. And like I said to you earlier, WWE is their hands been forced with where now they're looking for talents with where they can just mold them from scratch and allow them to teach them the WWE way. In regards to Josh, he came to me in 2015, football player, great athlete, great attitude. And I think he was destined because of his desire and his passion and his ability to be coached. He would have ended up in someone's radar at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you, as a coach, kind of comparing the two, would you rather day one start with somebody who raw athletically is just gifted, who's crazy gifted, or somebody who doesn't have maybe the athletic gifts that guy does, but he shows up to practice early, he stays late, he helps clean the mats, he does all that, he listens? It's two different people, but who would you rather get your hands on day one? Who's more exciting for Mike to get his hands on and mold?
I'll take the second guy all day long.
Yeah,
all day, hands down.
I think a guy like that would probably yield better long-term results than just an athletic guy.
Yes, he understands, he gets it. For me, it's looking for those little intangibles in a person. When they come to practice, on time, stay late, willing to do the little things, dump the trash, all the things that where from a teammate standpoint or bring value to the organization, willing to do anything. I think that speaks a lot, about an individual.
Yeah, I completely agree. If you're willing to set aside, if I'm willing to set aside my ego and say, look, yes, I did 10 years in the Army, and yes, I have this seniority at this job, and da-da-da-da. If I'm willing to say, let me set that aside, and hey, Mike, hey, coach, do we need to sweep the floors? Do you need me to clean the mats? What do you need me to do? And then I bust my ass in practice, and I bust my ass, during matches, and then I say, hey, coach, what tips? That guy in wrestling or outside of wrestling, I think is going to be more successful than somebody who just happens to have one or two gifts.
Yes. I'd go to bat from all day long. And I think it's, the more well-rounded you can be, and having that level of understanding and those intangibles and those little things, just allows you to be, just a step above, the guy that has the athletic gift, athleticism, because he might have an ego. He might not be coachable. He might not just, there's something that's just not clicking there.
Yeah. And just because you're athletic doesn't mean that you're going to be able to work a hard cam or have psychology or connect with the audience.
Yeah.
If you can do a 630, but none of the rest of your match means shit,
yeah,
why do I care?
It's full circle. It's like a pie, right? You cut it into slivers. You're looking for that all the way across the board with where there's something there with where they can connect all the dots.
Absolutely. So let's promo the new school that you guys are opening up. We talked a little bit about it, but tell me the name and when everything starts opening and what's coming. What's the vision for the future of the new school?
Well, it's in Concord, New Hampshire. It's called Elite Pro Wrestling Academy. The owner is Scott Reed, local independent wrestler that's been all around. Has done a lot of work. And another gentleman by the name of Sonny Goodspeed, who's working closely now with APW, a local promotion here that runs in Newburyport, Mass. And they're starting to find their way, running at different towns as well. But the school itself, like I was saying earlier, is 6,000 square foot facility, state of the art. There's a gym right next door. You open the door, and the gym is right there, and which is phenomenal. We'll be having classes, 4 nights a week, sometimes 5. We'll be able to run shows there because it will have that arena feel. We'll have overhead lighting trusses, sound and music, and everything that a new student would want. That's what this school is going to have. It's close to the city. It's accessible. It's state of the art, and hopefully we'll have great interest and great turnout. And I'm excited to share the new school with WWE, and hopefully that they'll come and visit. And some of my past students might come and show up as well to see with what we're doing. So I'm really excited. I haven't been this enthused in a long time. And so I'm looking to get started come the beginning of June and see with what we can turn out for pro athletes or pro wrestlers, but also good people.
Yeah. I think that's the more important of all of that is what the last thing you said is good people.
Right.
Because like for me, I have a daughter who is 7 years old, and I took her to a Mission Pro show, God, 8 months ago now. And the first show, she looked at me and she was like, "Dad, this is our thing now." And I need the pro wrestlers that my daughter watches. I need them to be good people. I need
Yes.
them to be somebody where I can say, "Look, baby, she kicked ass her way." That's an example. So yeah, I think now especially, I think the carny feel, the I'm just gonna steal money and do this, and the negativity from back in the day. I think all of that's gone,
It's
or
gone.
is getting ready to be completely gone.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really good thing for the future of the business.
It is. We need the business itself as a whole to be healthy. We've got to be ambassadors of the business. We've got to pave the way for the guys and girls that are trying to find their way now to be successful, whether it's on the independents or larger promotions. And, all that other stuff that had gone on in the past, just doesn't have a place anymore. We've got to be role models. We've got to educate. We've got to teach. And, it's important for us to be looked at in a higher regard. And, hopefully, some of the things that we're able to instill upon our students, whether it's doing with what they love or going in a different direction, will ultimately have an impact on them.
Absolutely. Are you guys now? Is it gonna be strictly an in-ring training thing, like performers, wrestlers, or are you guys gonna do like commentary training and referee training and manager training and
Everything, a full 360 of referees, managers, in-ring promos. We're really going to cover the gauntlet of just really trying to make it with where we're touching all the different aspects of the business, even down to ring crew, cleaning up, promo work, just with where, let's be honest, if a guy or a girl gets an opportunity to get looked at, the last thing that they want to be is unprepared. And that would be bad for us, bad for them. And, one of the things that I think that, we as a group that will allow us to be different from other schools is that we'll be in the weeds. And, people laugh at that. Well, what do you mean you're going to be in the weeds? So much that I've been taught from either Walter, Pat, or Dr. Tom, it's those little things of the decision makers when they're evaluating talent, whether it's how to take an arm, snatch a headlock, work up off the mat, take a leg, sell, register, facial expressions, body language, build sympathy, all those intangibles that, one needs to bring to the table because you've got to be able to sell tickets. And if I'm going to put you on TV, there's got to be something about you that's going to resonate where I don't click to change the channel. So that starts in a facility like Elite Pro Wrestling Academy in Concord, New Hampshire. And I think that we'll do that exceptionally well. And, we'll see where the future brings us.
Yeah. It's so funny that I bring this point up to almost everybody that I talk to about pro wrestling. You talk about intangibles. My favorite wrestler of all time is Eddie Guerrero. And my favorite moment of my favorite match of all time, Halloween Havoc 1997 versus Rey Mysterio, Cruiserweight title versus Rey's mask. There is a moment where Rey is getting ready to springboard off the top and do a reverse DDT onto Eddie. Eddie's in the wrong position by maybe a quarter of an inch, and he just steps back a quarter of an inch. No, when I say that to people are like, how the fuck do you remember that?
Yeah.
And it's because it's that small thing that made me go, oh, he gives a shit. He's paying attention to everything.
Yeah.
That moment to me, like I've showed it to my kids and my daughter's like, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Right.
But to me, when I see him step back that quarter of an inch, I'm like, he's a genius. He's an absolute genius. Yeah. So getting in the weeds it's gotta be so important.
It is. And, and it's hard today to, Monday Night Raw and AEW and, all great television shows in that sense. But from a teaching standpoint, it makes it challenging because that's what they think, happens instantaneously. And that's not the case, right? You can't put the roof on the house because if there's no foundation structurally, it's not going to stay in place. So your mechanics, all those little things that you were just talking about, and that I think that I hold near and dear to my heart, just really pays dividends in terms of, either being noticed for the right reasons or being noticed for the wrong reasons. And that's really what it comes down to. And, it's great that you can do all those cool moves. And, I've been at TV before in the afternoon, and the agents might say to the boys and girls, hey, I want to see you roll around on the ring, and I don't want to see anything flashy. I just want to see you work, right? I want to see you get from point A to point B. I want to see how you transition. I want to see how you take an arm, work out of it, get into something else. Some are lost, some, with where they're becoming exposed. So, that's a piece for us that's really important as well, is when, like I said, those opportunities come, but also being able to find work on the independents too and bring quality work there also. I mean, that's the other piece of the puzzle. Let's not put the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
Let's grind your teeth on the independents for a little while. And, and as an independent performer, learn how to paint that picture that the audience is going to see after the referee counts 3. And there's clarity there with the picture that they've just witnessed and that they just saw got painted. So there's a true level of understanding with what just happened instead of just a bunch of stuff that really means nothing.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's times where I'll watch a match physically and I'm like, oh, this is impressive, but why do I care? Like, what is it? It doesn't mean anything.
Right.
It's a reason why I will go back and I will watch Halloween Havoc 1997 or WrestleMania 3 Macho versus Ricky Steamboat or anything that Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes have ever done, because the attention to detail by those guys, from the way they look at the camera when they're talking, where their body position is, to everybody knows Ric Flair was notorious for actually living the gimmick. But that you talk about commitment, I don't know that anybody, independent or major federation, is doing that attention to detail anymore. And I think it's a lost art that, as a fan, I really, really want to see come back.
Yeah. I was just having this conversation the other day, and, we've programmed independent fans to be emotionally invested through spots. Right. And then if you turn the key back a few years, it was through psychology and timing and all those little things, with where I emotionally I want you pulling on my heartstrings with where, I understand the good guy versus the bad guy, and, all those little things come into play. And it's changed. But the one thing that will never change, that I think that's so important for everyone to understand, is that, you've got to have a solid base. You've got to have a good foundation, and you need to know how to do those little things well. And that will allow you to, prosper and to get with where you need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. We're in a great place, quality wise, because like I said, now we're getting all the utter bullshit out of wrestling. But there are some, sometimes you can't have your cake and eat it too. Sometimes you take losses on things. But what I think is really cool is now you have pro wrestlers giving back and opening up schools and trying to teach the next generation the right way, like the Dudleys, like, guys like that. Thunder Rosa, who's an active traveling wrestler herself, runs a wrestling school and runs a wrestling promotion. Like, I think getting the advice from somebody showing you the right way, instead of just showing you, okay, this is how you do a drop down, this is how you do a drop kick, like, all that's cool and you have to know the basics to do that. Why do I want to buy your t-shirt when your match is done?
Yeah.
Your drop kick is cool and I'll high five you and all that, but why do I want to come see you again?
Right.
What's so captivating? And you said it before, there has to be something.
Yes.
There has to be one thing.
Right.
How are you feeling as a coach about the future of where wrestling's going now?
I'm really excited. I think, as you said earlier, I think we're in a good place. I think it's continuing to prosper. Um, I think as we've heard and learned that guys and girls can make money on the independents today and survive and make a good living, traveling throughout the country. So I think that is a plus. I just think it's important for good quality schools to open up throughout the country. I think that piece is pivotal because I think there's a lot of good information, but sometimes there's bad information as well. And for anyone that's starting out today, do your homework, do your research and find out with where you're investing your money and with what you're going to get out of your investment, and make wise decisions. And I think that piece is important. I used to joke about it's that briefcase mentality. It's both, doing your business inside the ring, but also being able to do business outside the ring as well. Knowing how to talk to the promoters and deal with your coaches and when they're being constructive, and dealing with the other, the boys and girls, and all those things, come into play. So all in all, I think we're in a good place, and we'll see where it goes over the next couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the future is bright with the schools that are opening up, and I think the wrestlers that are kind of coming towards the end of their career and saying, like, look, if I don't teach these people the right way, there's not going to be a business.
Right.
So I think we're in a great place for that. I think as far as a fan, you mentioned something earlier, and I kind of want to bring it up. I'm a different kind of fan than most because I have combat experience.
Mm-hmm.
I'm jaded. So when I see pro wrestling, when I see really bad pro wrestling, I'm like, ugh, Jesus Christ. When I see great pro wrestling, though, I'm in love, and
Right.
you have me hooked.
Me too.
How hard do you think it is for people who are jaded to the business, for new guys to find that niche, to get a guy like me who literally made his living fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq? How hard is it for that new guy, that green guy, to take a fan like me and make him a believer?
I think one of the things that's vitally important is when you are working, it's that sense of realism. There's no gaps, there's no hold. It's authentic, it's believable, it's credible, it's solid, it's impactful. There's something that you bring it, right. There's something there. You're just not going through the motions. From the curtain to the tie-up, it's game on, and here we go all the way to the end until the referee counts 3. And it's the small stuff, right? I mean, that's what basically it all comes down to, right? It's none of that glitz and glamour bullshit. It's, can you from locking horns to taking it on to snatching a headlock? How do you do those things? Are you half-assing it, or you're bringing it? And you better bring it.
Yeah, you absolutely. I love, like I said, we're in a great place because there's so much variety. One of the guys that I love right now, he's super athletic, but I think his more important aspect to him is his selling, is Ricochet. That guy sells his ass off. And I mean, from Sheamus to Cesaro, whoever he's fighting, it always looks like they're killing Ricochet every time he gets hit. And to me, as a guy who has seen combat, I'm like, if somebody punched me in the face, that's how I would fall.
Yeah.
That's exactly how I would fall. And that's the one thing that I think sometimes even seasoned guys don't understand.
Yeah.
Is you have to do it to where you suspend my disbelief. I know what pro wrestling is. The fans know what pro wrestling is. This isn't the 80s. We understand what it is. But if you, as a wrestler, there's a guy named Alexander Crowley here in San Antonio. And when he hits this jumping knee like 9 billion other people doing wrestling now. But when he hits it, every time I see him hit it, I mean, I know it's coming, but every time he hits, God damn. That's what, and it's just so small, but it's one of those things, and I told him to this on my show. It's one of those things that keeps me coming back to him every time, because I know you're paying attention to what you're doing. It's, as a fan, to see somebody give a shit about their work, I fall in love with you and will be a loyal fan for the rest of your life.
Yeah. One of the things that I think that's really important today, that's missing, that I wish I could see more of, is today's workers really understanding of being able to live in the moment.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is let's get some mileage out of the beautiful things that they do in the ring and let it resonate outside the ring ropes to the people sitting in the front row. It's like going to a great dinner, right? I mean, don't stuff it down their throat. Let them enjoy the quality of work that you're bringing, and you're talking about selling. That's a lost art today as well. More often not, people are afraid to sell. They think that it hurts them. But God, if you can learn how to sell it, it's money. It's money, money, money. And, that's one of the things that we'll focus on as well, because it's with what creates that emotional investment with where people want to see you kick the shit out of that heel when the time is right.
Abso-fucking-lutely. And it's one of the things that I loved about Eddie was his attention to detail and his ability to essentially fuck with the crowd however he wanted to.
Yeah.
There's not an Eddie Guerrero match where you could go from loving him and laughing at what he's doing to absolutely fucking despising Eddie, to wanting him to get his ass kicked by Ray, to wanting him to beat JBL. That, to me, is that's the definition of what a pro wrestler should be.
Eddie was a great mechanic, and what made him a great mechanic is that he did all those, to your point, he did all those little things exceptionally well, and it just resonated, and it stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to wind down a little bit here.
Sure.
I've kept you almost for an hour. Just a couple of more questions.
Shoot.
Who was somebody that you watched, not necessarily while you're in the business, it can be, but who's somebody that you watched that you're like, man, he should have been bigger than he was, or she should have been bigger than they were?
Great question. There was a student that I had way back when that I always thought that should have got an opportunity. His name was Arch Kincaid, and there was just something about him that was uniquely different. Great communicator, just entertaining as all hell. And he's probably the one guy that sticks with me to this day that I wish he got over the hump and, they found something for him to do. But he's probably the one guy that sticks with me today.
Yeah.
Because it's hard, because, there's only so many spots, and it's just, at the right time, the right place. And, you just never know with what they're looking for. Some guys fall into it. Other guys just have to continue to grind. So you just got to be prepared. So when the door opens, you can go.
Yeah. And I think the other two, that question is kind of loaded, because success is kind of determined by what you think success is or what that person thinks success is.
Right.
But I think for me, the modern example that I can think is Dolph Ziggler.
Yeah.
Brilliant psychology, brilliant selling. He's a world record holding amateur wrestler. Like, the guy can go top to bottom, can talk his ass off. They just don't have a spot for him.
No.
And it sucks, because Dolph, if you put Dolph as the Intercontinental champion or the heavyweight champion, that title instantly means more because of who Dolph is.
Yeah.
Another question I had is, what does it take to book a show? Like, how crazy intense is that process of booking from opening to close of a show?
Well, you have to look at it with where the show itself is a giant match. And, you understand from peaks and valleys and how important it is from the opening contest and with what that means, and from setting the tone for the entire evening. More often than not, we always looked at the opening match as probably the two best workers on the card, right? With where they can get up and go, and they know how to change gears.
Yep.
There's something about them that just resonates with the people and allows you to open up with some fire. And, and then you go along in terms of your story. Not every match has to be a WrestleMania match. It depends if you're running, how often that you're running during the course of a month. I mean, that has to come into play as well from a storyline standpoint. And then after, intermission, you want to make sure your popcorn matches aren't having main event matches and leaving nothing for the main event per se. I've seen that more often than not. And guys would say, "Hey, Mike, what'd you think about my match?" Well, you did a lot. I'm being kind. And, out of respect, there's the main event that's coming. And then I think the other piece is that, everybody understands their role and with what's being expected of them to do. I think it's important from Outback standpoint that there's an agent with where, there's guys that are helping the boys put stuff together work wise and with where it makes sense, and can tell a, constructive story, keeping guys in a good place with where they're not, going off the rails, because they want to go into business for themselves, understanding that they're there for a reason and with where they are on the card. I think that's, part of the business that, needs to be taught as well from what your expectations are. And then having talent show up consistently. I think that's the other piece as well. Double booking, and all those things that come into play. So it's a lot of work. I've got a friend that, I'm close with now that's doing it, and he's got his hands full.
I have this really weird dream of not weird, but I really want to break into the business, not from a performer, not from like a wrestler standpoint, but behind the scenes. Like my biggest goal is to sit behind a commentary desk for a company. That's where I want to get to. How important are commentators, in your opinion, to putting the guys over and helping matches work?
A huge piece with where, from the fan standpoint, they're watching from the physicality standpoint that's happening within the ring, right? And then commentators, gentlemen like yourself, is being able to put the icing on the cake of what they're hearing and with what they're seeing and help, transcend that story in a place with where there's that much more meaning to it when, finally when it's time to go home. So
Yeah.
it's pivotal.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I got some really good advice from a female commentator who named Brittany Nicole. She's amazing. She's down southwest sides of the states. She actually runs her own promotion in Louisiana. First woman to ever own or run a promotion in the history of Louisiana. So she's always going to be top notch in my book. And I asked her, I said, look, you do commentary. I want to break into commentary. What's the best advice you can give me? She said 2 things. Put on the Peacock, put on WWE Network, turn the volume off, and commentate the match to yourself. Get practice. Yeah. She said the other thing, watch every commentary, not just wrestling commentary. Watch football commentary, basketball commentary, and golf and swimming, and find out why they're hitting notes and certain things and why they. She said, you know their psychology in the ring. What people don't know is their psychology behind why commentators are saying this at this spot and why they're plugging this, here and there. And it's one of those things where I was like, this is the deepest shit I've ever heard.
True.
And she really just told me 2 things.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, I'm one of the fans. I'm a very different fan in the fact that I want to give back to the business that has meant so much to me. I woke, I got into my fandom through my grandmother. My grandmother was, AWA, Greg Gagne, like the Killer Bees. Like she loved that. And she was a tape trader, my grandmother. And I've been lucky enough for 36 years to be a fan, and now connecting with my daughter with it, like we talked about it. It's a generational thing. And I don't think enough people really understand, fans or workers, really understand the power that really great wrestling has.
Agreed.
And I don't even mean great technically, but just wrestling where you can sit back and be a fan.
Right.
And I think facilities like yours that are coming up with experience like yours for the next generation, I think it's going to do nothing but build more fandom, more, people forget that the word fan means fanatic. It's a shortened version of fanatic. And I have an Intercontinental and a US title hanging up on my wall. I have action figures as a 36-year-old man. Like, I'm a fanatic about this stuff. And it's one of those things where people used to make fun of me for being a wrestling fan. And I always used to tell them, like, look, you keep on, keep that same energy. But when wrestling blows up and is running the world, I'm just going to say I told you so. And I think now we're at that era.
Yeah. I think we're definitely, like, to your point, we're going in a direction with where there'll be, a lot of great takeaways in a lot of different areas, opportunities for, guys like you. I will say this, I'm very fortunate, to be able to do with what I, am doing. If it wasn't for, Walter or Pat it's not my right. It's a privilege with what I do. And I don't take that lightly. People, give me their time to come and learn. It's my, responsibility to put them in the best place as possible, both in the ring and out of the ring. And that's a huge responsibility. And I'm very mindful and respectful of that. And I think that will allow us to be to go in a direction with where we need to go in years to come.
Yeah, I completely agree. I told JP from Irish Whip, my brother, I appreciate you setting this up so much. This has probably been my favorite interview I've done in 70 episodes. I told JP, I said, I'm going to have to do a segment episode or a couple of different episodes because I'm such a fan and I'm such a, I don't want to say student, but I love learning about wrestling. I love learning about the insides about it and all of it. So JP, I owe you a nice bottle of scotch when I see you.
Well, we just scratched the surface. So at some point, maybe 6 months, we can do it again, right? Absolutely. I'd love to be able to circle back. I had a great time on JP. He was, great time on his show as well.
JP is a great guy. Big old giant teddy bear of a man, 6'8",
yes.
Big old dude. Coach, before I let you go, plug the school one more time. Put out your social medias. If the school's going to have merch, plug everything. Let everybody know where they can find you.
It's Elite Pro Wrestling Academy out of Concord, New Hampshire. You can find EliteProWrestlingAcademy.com website. You'll have all our information there for all the students. And just like I said, looking to get started and see where things go. And we'll take one day at a time. Thank you for the opportunity to come on the show. Greatly appreciate it. It's always great to talk wrestling with guys that are passionate. It's always a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Before we go, everybody in the chat, JP, Salad Bar, my boy, Josh, everybody in the chat, thank you guys for coming in and watching the interview. I like to do before I end any of my shows, I like to close it kind of out like this. If you are struggling with your mental health, my social media is open. My DMs are open. If you need somebody to talk to, if you need somebody to just bitch and vent and rant about, please DM me. We are in an era where suicide is rising by the day. Before it gets to that point, know that you have an outlet in me. Know that you have somebody in me who has survived suicide attempts. Please reach out. Please reach out. I love you guys for listening and for watching and supporting. You will never know how much you mean to me. God, I'm getting emotional. You will never know how much you guys really mean to me. And thank you for the support. Thank you for the love. Coach, thank you for being on.
Greatly appreciate it. Michael, thank you. God bless. Stay strong. Stay positive.
Yes, sir. All right, guys.
Good.
We will see you next week.